everyone, and welcome to ATAR Notes April lecture series. My name is Maddie, and I am so excited today to be taking you on the journey through QCE English Units 3 and 4. Whether you're heading into Year 12 at the end of this year or you're already a little bit of a way through it, today I hope I'm going to be able to offer you guys a few tips and tools and tricks that you can use to make the most of your time in senior English and ensure that you are the most comfortable and confident in your studies as you absolutely can be. Today's a pretty jam-packed session. We have 2 full hours of content to get through, and as we're going through, there will be a live Q&A chat down below this video, so make sure you go and make the most of that resource. There will be an incredible tutor there to moderate that chat and to answer all of your questions. There really is no such thing as a silly question, particularly when it comes to English, so make sure you make the most of that. Go down, ask all of your questions, air all of your concerns, and both the tutor and your peers that are watching along with you will be able to help out with that. But before we get any further into English and into what we're going to be talking about in our session today, I wanted to take a brief moment to introduce you guys to ATAR Notes. If this is the very first time you are joining us for any sort of lecture series, I wanted to say a particularly special warm welcome to you. We are so stoked that you are here. Thank you for choosing ATAR Notes. We are an education company that's passionate about making study easy for students, and we've been doing that for a very long time. And over the time that we've been in operation, we have been creating a huge amount of high quality resources for students so that their studies can be as easy as possible. And the coolest thing about the resources that we create is that the vast majority of them have been created by past students, high achieving students that are familiar with the structures that you guys are familiar with, that know what it's like to be in the stressful situations, that have done all of the assessments and assignments that you have done. So it really is a whole set of kind of invaluable resources for you guys, including study notes, articles, videos, newsletters, online discussions, even an ATAR calculator. There is so much to explore and really a resource for every kind of learner at every kind of stage. So if you're interested to find out a little bit more, or some of those resources pique your interest and maybe get you excited to find out a little bit more about them, then please head to atarnotes.com/register to explore, check them out, and we hope to see more of you there. However, the free resources are not all that we offer. We also offer a huge high range of high quality resources, including TuteSmart, which is online tutoring from elite recent Year 12 graduates. We have study guides. If you like the more tangible study guide, you like something that you can hold in your hands, then we have incredible study guides. And also Ed Unlimited, which is a huge online database with literally thousands of study resources, including practice exams, text guides, study guides, all kinds of amazing things, even flashcards recently. It is such a cool resource and definitely something I encourage you guys to check out. Again, if you're interested in any of those, then atarnotes.com/register is the place to be. Okay, enough shameless plugging. Let me introduce myself, since I am going to be talking to you for the next couple of hours. As I mentioned before, hello, hi, my name is Maddie. I graduated from BGGS in 2020, which is now almost 4 years ago. That is a pretty ridiculous timeline to be working with. It's a little bit scary that I've been out of school for that long, but while I have been out of school, I have been busy studying some more. I currently study a double degree in communications and arts at the University of Queensland. And I'm here today to teach you how to tell good stories, essentially. Good stories of all kinds, not just the narrative, creative kind, but the analytical kind, the persuasive kind as well. And that little photo of me is me and a raviolo I made in Milan. This is a fun fact for you, and this probably tells you a little bit about me because I know this fact. Ravioli is actually the plural word So if you have many little pieces of pasta, that's ravioli. A singular piece is a raviolo. So you can go and look really cool in front of your friends and family when you share that fun fact with them. Okay, we have so much to get through today. At the bottom of the screen, you'll be able to see a little bit of a highlight, a little bit of an introduction about what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to start off with a few tips and advice about English, about how to write well, about how to improve in your English skills. Then we'll move into persuasive writing, talk all about the master of the argument. Then we'll get into creative writing and writing a good narrative, writing a good story. And finally, we'll wrap up with a little bit of analytical at the end. And I'm sure many of you are mostly interested in that analytical section of our session today. That's what's kind of gotten you here. And that's fine. That's okay. I understand that. But you're going to have to be a little bit patient. We'll get to it in just a little bit. And then we'll wrap up and have a little bit of a summary at the end. Wonderful. All right, my first tip for writing well in English and being a solid writer is to write like a real person. This is the rule that I tell all of my students, and I've been telling my students ever since I graduated. It's very easy, particularly in school, to slip into the habit of using really complex and winding and academic language. You have the tendency to want to sound smart, to want to sound as if you know what you're talking about and as if you have a really solid grasp on all of the concepts. And so you result in going to, default rather, towards academic language. However, if this is done incorrectly, if you lean too much into that kind of language, it's likely that you'll create the opposite effect, which is sounding like a fool. So the number one rule is to focus on clearly conveying your point, structuring your arguments well, and making sure that your writing flows naturally. The golden rule of writing in English is clarity over complexity. You can write the most beautiful paragraph with long, winding sentences and beautiful prose and really long, kind of complex, flowery vocabulary. But if whoever is marking your work can't actually figure out what your argument is or what sort of message you're trying to share in your story, then you're not going to get a good mark. And at the end of the day, you need to be clearing those arguments first. You need to be ensuring that they are the clearest part of your writing. And that little exemplar there, the kind of writing we're trying to avoid is, in writing his 1945 novella Animal Farm, George Orwell effervescently constructed an allegorical fable which shrewdly celebrates the Soviet Union's ascension to power. Cool. I mean, it sounds nice coming off the tongue, but what does it actually mean? There's really no way of knowing. Instead, we condense it, we make it simple, we make it straightforward, we make it to the point. George Orwell's 1945 novella Animal Farm is an effective fable which allegorically reflects on the rise of the Soviet Union. Much nicer, much crisper, and much easier to understand. All right, second tip is to read before you write. When you're given a task sheet at the start of the term, and hopefully also a marking guide by your teacher, it is really important that you read through it in its entirety before you jump into the task, even if you've done a task similar to it before. Go through, highlight, and mark all of the most important points on the sheet, and it's essential that you know exactly what it is that the task is and what your marker is looking for. What are the words that are repeated? So I find that in a lot of English marking guides, you'll see the word discernibly in there a lot, which tells me that all of the choices you have to make as an author, as the writer of this piece, needs to be intentional. So when you see the word discernibly, you mean, okay, so you understand that, okay, the teacher wants me to be making really intentional choices in my writing in order to get a good mark. Something that helped me a lot when I was writing, and it honestly continues to help me a lot when I'm writing because I still have to do a lot of writing at uni, is to write out the most important instructions in my own words. It's sort of like a little to-do list or a little checklist, or even just in sentence form. and I put them up the top of my Word document. So everything that I'm writing, I can go back and I can refer exactly, what is my task? Is this writing achieving the task that I have been given? And you leave it there right until your final edit where you get rid of it. So then you can hand it in. Now be sure to get rid of it before you hand it in, or otherwise you'll have a strange little piece of writing at the top of your assignment. It is so helpful in the editing process as you're reading through, just checking again, is this writing achieving this task? Is this writing achieving this task? The number one thing to say as well in this is that if things are unclear, ask the question. There's absolutely no shame in saying to your teacher, I don't really understand this task, even if you've done it before. I don't really understand this task, or I don't really understand what this section of the task is asking me to do, or this particular criteria is asking me to do. Your teachers, they're there to help you. They will appreciate you being proactive and coming to them with your questions and your concerns. So definitely ask them about it, and you can also ask your peers about it as well. All right. My next key general tip is to go with the flow. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on in today's session, but it's super important that your writing flows and has a sort of logical build up throughout. This is particularly true in analytical writing. Teachers and markers put a lot of emphasis on this idea of building an argument consistently throughout a piece, as your thesis and points need to connect well with each other throughout your piece to sort of demonstrate that you're doing that well. So the easiest way to get into the habit of ensuring that your writing flows is having a really solid plan before you start writing. It just allows you to see all of your arguments out on the page. It allows you to see, am I putting my strongest arguments first? It allows you to see, am I actually using good analysis to build up my writing? If you're doing something like a narrative task, it allows you to see, am I actually building tension? Am I building tension up to a climax? Am I allowing there to be some sort of resolution? Having it all out in front of you will definitely ensure that you're not getting mixed up in, writing about things that aren't really linked to your key message in a narrative sense, or your key argument in an analytical or persuasive sense. So that is really important. If you try and kind of hold all of that information in your head and just kind of like write off the cuff, then generally you'll start doing things like waffle or talk about things that aren't really connected to your thesis or your argument. And you typically get marked down for things like that. So make sure you have a really solid plan. Having a solid plan also helps with things like writer's block, because you can really easily just refer to what you have written down and go, okay, I need to know what I need to achieve next, or what I need to write next. And that will generally keep things flowing nicely in terms of writing. Never, ever, ever skip planning. As someone who has been tutoring for quite a while and has definitely read and marked a lot of students' work, you can tell the difference between a student who has very clearly planned versus one who is just sort of writing off the cuff. So make sure you go ahead and plan for all of your writing work in English. My next tip is to give yourself time to improve. A lot of students feel as if maybe English is not quite as pressing as subjects that have exams, and so they generally leave assignment writing a little bit later. But the problem with that is that you don't actually have a lot of time to edit and rewrite your work. So it's a really good idea to give yourself time to draft and redraft again, because it will allow you to hand in the very best possible quality of work at the end. Rome wasn't built in a day. No high quality or award-winning novel or poem or play or speech was written in a single day. These authors gave themselves time to redraft and re-edit throughout. So what I basically mean by this is start your English assignments, your big pieces of writing, as soon as possible. Even if that's just getting a really solid plan down and then writing your introduction in the first sort of week or so you have the task. And it just gives you so much more time to have bad writing, and then in the last sort of crunch time, you already have a whole lot of information that you can use as a foundation to build a really solid piece of writing on. It's a win-win situation. but it only happens if you get started early. So definitely go ahead, get started as early as possible. It also allows you to do things incrementally, which means that you don't have to be sitting down and writing like 1,000 words within 2 hours. You can just do sort of 100, 200, 250 words at a time. And it means that you're less likely to procrastinate as well, because it's a much smaller task that you have to be tackling each time. Okay, you should be talking to yourself. And I don't mean in a creepy way, not sort of sitting in a corner with your knees pulled up to your chest, muttering and rocking back and forth. I really just mean reflecting and also reading your work out loud. So let's talk about reading your work out loud first. When you get a piece of assessment back, and you're looking through and maybe you've dropped a sort of handful of marks and you're pretty disappointed because you feel like you worked really hard on it. Your arguments were really solid and strong. You felt like you were doing good synthesis, that there was a logical flow to your work and all of these sorts of things. And you realize that the marks that you dropped weren't for any of your ideas, but over things like grammar. You didn't have your commas in the right places, a few key words were misspelled, you didn't format your paragraphs properly and things like that. There is truly almost nothing more frustrating when getting a piece of work back and finding that you've dropped marks over really small and kind of silly details. So it's really important to be editing your work very carefully before you hand it in. It ensures that you sort of avoid this problem. And one of the best ways to edit well to ensure that you catch those little mistakes is by reading your work out loud. When you read your work aloud, when you read anything aloud, your brain is basically processing the information in a different way. It's likely that you've read the work in your head a whole bunch of times, but reading it aloud allows you to pick up on mistakes. You realize that words are spelt wrong. You realize that there's commas missing, all of those sorts of things. So definitely make time in your editing process to be reading your work aloud. The other type of talking to yourself I'm referring to is reflecting. So I really truly understand the compulsion when you get a piece of work back to just throw it away and never think about it again, and that's certainly true in year 12 especially. But I encourage you to go back and sort of understand the mistakes that you might have made and how that might allow you to improve in the future. So if you're watching this video and you're in year 11 and you're heading into year 12, you might currently be doing a whole bunch of assignments that you'll do again in year 12. Instead of just putting those assignments aside and thinking, okay, I'll get back to those when we get to them in year 12, take the time to go through them carefully, understanding the mistakes you made, understanding what sections of the criteria you need to work on. It will allow you to be far more prepared when you get to doing those tasks in year 12, and you'll have a little bit of a checklist, a little bit of a to-do list, even a little bit of a battle plan about how you're going to address those mistakes and put forward even higher quality work in year 12. Now, if you're in year 12, I'm sure a few of you might be thinking, Maddie, I never, ever want to have to do this kind of writing ever again. But unfortunately, I'm not gonna lie, if you guys decide to go to university, then you're gonna have to be doing long form writing again. And there are so many things you can learn from your high school writing tasks that will help you in university. And even if you don't go to uni, a lot of different jobs will also require you to be doing some sort of writing task every now and then, whether it's reports or anything like that. So the more you can learn now in high school, the less you have to learn later when you would prefer to be thinking about other things. All right. Nice little typo there from me, nourish you mind. Nourish your mind is the point I'm trying to make here. Now, a lot of students come to me and they ask me, Maddie, how can I get better at English? How can I get better at writing? It's just not something that comes naturally to me. And the key tips that I wanted to offer for you is to write as much as possible. Write as much as possible and read as much as possible. So one of the easiest ways that you can improve your writing is by reading. If you can get in 15 minutes or more or less of good reading every day, you will really begin to tell the difference between good and bad writing. You'll be able to see what sort of tips and techniques that the professional authors use in order to build their story, to make a point, to get good characterization, to convince readers of something. Not only that, but also your grammar and your vocabulary will improve. That's one of the easiest ways to get a better vocab is by just reading more. And it won't be so hard to tackle big writing tasks because you already have an idea of how to entertain and engage in all of those sorts of things. If you want to really stretch yourself, then I encourage you to read lots of different types of writing, novels, nonfiction, poetry, and different genres as well. And within that, you might discover a bit of a new passion. Now, in the past, I've just told people to do this and then sort of set them free to do it. But I have a few quick reading recommendations because often I am asked for this. If you are a fantasy buff, then the book I would recommend is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is amazing. It is set in a fictional sort of fantasy Oxford University, and it is about translation and magic, and it is really, really excellent. R.F. Kuang is amazing. So for fantasy sort of stuff, this is sort of historical fantasy, Babel. If you are interested in getting into a little bit of non-fiction, then I can't recommend memoirs enough. Michelle Zorner, who is the lead singer of a band called Japanese Breakfast, wrote an incredible memoir called Crying in H Mart, and I definitely recommend this one. If you prefer more of a mystery, thriller, crime sort of style, then The Dry by Jane Harper. This is an Australian novel set in a country town called Kiwara, and it was recently made into a movie, and then a sequel movie came out recently as well. So this is pretty incredible. I really enjoyed this one, and clearly it was well received. It won a whole bunch of awards. And then if you're interested in reading some classics, or you really enjoy classics, then I cannot recommend To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee enough. This is an amazing book. It kind of changed my life when I read it. It will just give you such a new, interesting, nuanced understanding about history and civil rights in the US. So definitely read this, and if you've read it before and it's been a while, reread it. So those are my 4 recommendations for today. Make sure you ask for recommendations, or even put some of your favorite books in the live Q&A chat below, and encourage others to be reading because it's so good for your brain and it will definitely help with your writing skills as well. All right, a few little tips about English just to wrap up our advice section at the start. You don't need to enjoy English to be good at it, but it really helps. If you're going into the English classroom every week thinking, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be doing this stuff, none of it's interesting, then you're not actually going to be engaging in the material in a sort of deep way, and it's more likely that you won't do as well in it. So I encourage you to have some fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. Have opinions on all of the characters and concepts that you're talking about. Have lots of discussions in class. Have friends around you to talk about English. I promise if you decide that you're going to enjoy it, you will be better at it. And that goes for all of your subjects. Use the resources around you. Your peers and friends in your class can be such useful, helpful resources. The magic of humankind is that everyone is unique and different. Everyone comes from different cultural backgrounds. Everyone has different identities, ethnicities, all of these things. And it means that everyone has different perspectives on the exact same thing. So everyone has a different take on characters, or a different take on books and plays and movies and things. So have conversations with each other, ask each other questions, ask each other why. Why do you think this? Why do you think that? It's important to make your own success. So this is really linked to the last tip as well. Being proactive, particularly in year 12, is so important. Your teachers are there to help you. So if you have issues, if you have concerns, go to them with those questions and concerns. If you feel like your classroom teacher is not someone that you feel very comfortable approaching, then feel as if you can go to the other teachers in your English department as well, and be able to ask them questions. They will appreciate you going to them with them. All right. Let's actually get into a little bit of content here, a little bit of actual English, rather than just my tips and tricks and ramblings. Okay, let's talk persuasive writing. So the purpose of persuasive writing is to position audiences to endorse a particular viewpoint or opinion. And usually it's the viewpoint or opinion of the author, which is you. You are the speechwriter in this context. Key features of persuasive: it's using carefully chosen evidence to help position the audience. So language is chosen to sway opinion, and it will also often carry more emotion than information. And there is a series of adaptable techniques that can be used to strengthen the argument. So typically persuasive writing comes in the form of oral presentations, so you'll be doing a speech, but I know for some students you'll be sort of writing something instead, writing a script, maybe doing a video rather than a live presentation. There's definitely variation in how persuasive is used. Some techniques used in persuasive writing can be incorporated into different writing styles to enhance an author's thesis. Very interesting. Okay, this is a little snapshot from the QCEE syllabus. So the persuasive speech or persuasive spoken response is IA2, or internal assessment 2, worth 25% of your final grade. And it says this assessment focuses on the creation of a perspective through reasoned argument to persuade an audience. It is an open-ended task responding to representations of a contemporary social issue in the media within the previous year. While students may undertake some research in the production of this extended response, it is not the focus of this technique. There is no prescribed text list for this assessment instrument. Students may support their responses with multimodal elements, such as digital, appropriate to the context and audience. Very good. So pretty straightforward. You need to come up with your own argument, your own perspective on a social issue that's occurred within media in the past 12 months. A little bit of research to help you, to guide you with your argument, but it's not a research task. It's more about the presentation and more about the writing. All right, a few little things in the specifications. Respond to a representation of a contemporary social issue in media texts. A persuasive argument of their own. It needs to be your own argument, which adds to the public dialogue, so you're not just repeating another argument that someone else has. It needs to feel as if it is wholly your own. So you're to choose a contentious issue that has appeared in the media. Issues of contemporary social relevance may be drawn from the broader topics of gender, power, race, religion, age, class, and sustainability. So there's lots there to be pulling from. And you need to present a contention or a thesis in relation to the chosen issue and develop an argument that reflects your particular perspective as the author and writer of this task and makes use of cultural assumptions, attitudes, values, and beliefs. So not only do you need to present your own perspective, but you need to demonstrate that you have a solid understanding of the cultural assumptions that shape and influence the way that an audience might respond to your perspective as well. Oh yes, and employ and synthesize nuanced rhetorical and persuasive strategies to position an audience to accept the perspective constructed in the text. So you're using persuasive elements, you're using persuasive features in order to enhance your work, to make it stronger, and to also add to your performance, the spoken element of this task as well. Okay, so you guys might be familiar with those three words, this idea of ethos, pathos, and logos. Essentially, a whole bunch of years ago, thousands of years ago, a bunch of Greeks sat down and they decided that they were going to figure out how humans were persuaded, what made people change their mind or adopt a particular perspective. And this is kind of what they came up with. There are three different techniques or three different ways that a human might be persuaded to believe something is true: ethos, pathos, and logos. And I love the formatting of ethos, how that turned out. Ethos. So ethos is all about appealing to morals, ethics, character, etc. Pathos is all about appealing to an audience's emotion, and logos is all about appealing to an audience's logic. So ethos really surrounds this idea of justice, this idea of right and wrong. Is it good and okay that something is considered this way or someone is depicted this way? Is it okay that we let this innocent group of people suffer? These are the kind of questions that you're asking with ethos. Now, everyone is sort of born with an internal compass, a moral compass. Everyone sort of has this idea of what is good and right. We basically know that hurting someone is not an okay thing to do. We don't really have to be taught that. I mean, a little bit, but it becomes pretty intrinsic to us as we get older. And so that's what you're appealing to with ethos, this idea of justice. With pathos, it's all about appealing to the audience's emotions. So humans are incredibly emotional creatures. This is why we like videos of baby animals so much. And so you're basically appealing to those emotions. So imagery is a really strong persuasive feature to be using when it comes to pathos. It's creating this really vivid picture of what the topic is that you're talking about, and basically getting the audience to examine that closely and to feel all of the emotions of it. So you want to appeal to things like fear, anger, concern, empathy, all of those sorts of emotions. And then finally, logos. And logos is all about logic. It's the data, it's the numbers, it's the statistics that surround this topic or idea. And it's really important to know that every single person will connect to these different techniques differently. I'm very much a pathos person. I respond to emotion the best. That's how you persuade me of something, just to give you a little peek behind the curtain. But in terms of my older brother, he is absolutely a logos person. He needs data, he needs statistics in order to be persuaded. So when you are writing a persuasive speech, you don't want to just have one example of this. You don't want to purely be writing in pathos or purely be writing in logos. You want to have a spread of each of these throughout your work. Now, I want you to, let's take a quick 5-minute break to do a little activity. I want you to, let's go timer, sorry. Make sure we're on track by keeping a timer. I want you to write an example of ethos, pathos, and logos for this topic. If you were to persuade someone that geese, the birds, like a goose, is more dangerous than a crocodile, how would you do so using these 3 techniques? So I've set a timer for 5 minutes. It's starting now. Have a think, have a go. How would you persuade someone that geese are more dangerous than crocodiles using ethos? How would you persuade someone that geese are more dangerous than crocodiles using pathos? And the same for logos. So have a go. I know that I've been talking at you for a while, so I'll give you an opportunity to have a write, to have a think for yourself. How might you go ahead and convince someone that this is the case using those different techniques? Alright, about a minute left. Jot down your last couple of ideas. Be creative, think outside the box. Alright, 10 seconds. Punctuate those last couple of sentences and let's move on. A really crucial part of the structure of persuasive writing is the hook. Audiences don't have a lot of attention. They don't actually have very long attention spans. So it's really crucial that you grab their attention right at the beginning. If you can't get them in the first 20 seconds of something, then they're probably not going to pay attention to most of what you write afterwards or what you say afterwards. So it's really important that you grab them right from the beginning. You don't want to start with, "Good morning, everyone. My name is Maddie Pride." It's boring and doesn't give the audience anything to latch onto. It doesn't make them curious. It doesn't make them want to know more. So instead, we want to let the topic speak for itself, and you can get to the introductions later. It's kind of like a teaser trailer. You might see them on TikTok or Instagram Reels or something. They're like 15, 30 seconds long, really short and sharp. They're engaging. They're typically quick. They go. This is what you kind of want to do in your hook. Shock is another thing that you can rely on. If you shock people with a really strong, emotionally charged anecdote or a really interesting or sort of shocking piece of data, then audiences will be hooked and they'll want to know more. An example hook might go something like this. A chain gang of workers march with pallid faces and gaunt figures to their stations. They are little more than bones, scarred skin stretched over empty stomachs. They are Apple slaves, and for decades we have been oblivious to their torture, but no longer. See, it's interesting. You want to know more. What are they talking about? What do you mean, Apple slaves? What does this mean for us? Why are you telling me this? So this is what you kind of want to achieve with the hook. It's all about getting people curious, all about getting them to want to know more. In the structure of your actual persuasive piece, you are not a poet, a tortured poet, lamenting a cursed existence as fun as that may be. It is your job to, throughout your writing, convince your audience of a point. You're building on an argument, a thesis, a contention, in the same way you're doing that in an analytical piece of writing. If your writing is a mess of exaggerated thoughts, over-the-top prose, or a whole bunch of data and statistics that aren't really linked to anything, then people aren't going to be convinced of your argument. They're not going to be persuaded that it is true. They'll lose interest, or they'll question your sincerity. They'll question your allegiance to this idea in the first place. So it's good to employ a basic structure to keep yourself in check throughout. So that's your introduction, your body points, your body paragraphs, and your conclusion. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in your introduction, you have your hook, you have your introduction, you say, "Hello, my name is Maddie Pride. I'm so excited to be talking to you today." You have a thesis, you have your contention. What are you going to be arguing in your speech? And then you have a preview of your points. Firstly, I'm going to be discussing this. Secondly, I'm going to be discussing this. Thirdly, I'm going to be discussing this. Within your body paragraph, your body points, it's important that you're going to be employing each of the different types of ethos, pathos, and logos to be appealing to a wide an audience as possible. At the start of your paragraphs, you need to have a topic sentence. Firstly, I will be discussing blah, 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 and you go into your point. You argue a specific point within that paragraph. You're not arguing multiple things at the same time. You have one singular point that you're proving within your paragraph, which links back to your umbrella argument, which is your thesis. And then in your conclusion, you have a call to action. So a call to action is basically saying there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, I understand that this issue is bleak, that it's depressing, but there's something that we can do about it. And it's your job as the speaker to convince the audience that they have a role in fixing this problem. So the best way to structure a call to action is to split the audience into different groups. You might have parents, you might have students, you might have corporate executives, you might have reporters, you might have grocery store suppliers. You break your audience down into different groups and you give each different group a particular role, a particular job that they can do to fix the problem. Now, you need to be aware of the what this group might be able to achieve. If you're talking to a bunch of students, they can't just hop on a plane and fly down to Canberra and protest outside of Parliament House. Instead, you need to think a little bit more realistically of what they might be able to achieve. So you might tell them that they can sign petitions or call their local members or share important information on Instagram and tell their friends about things. So just be mindful about what each group can achieve and tailor their call to action to them and the specific resources and skills that they might have. It's really important to be familiar with the classic tools that you might have, and the distinct tools that you can be using as persuasive techniques. So some of the most common ones are machine gunning, repetition, alliteration, rhetorical questions, including the audience, so saying, using inclusive language, we, us, together, we understand this is the case. Together we can make a difference. Really emotive language and anecdotes as well. It's really important that you use these techniques in moderation. You're not just slamming them out one after another, because as we mentioned earlier, if your writing is overly emotional, if it's really jam-packed with these kind of features, then the argument gets lost beneath all of them and we don't actually know what you're trying to persuade us of. So remember, as I said at the start of today, clarity over complexity. It's so important. Make sure that your argument is really clear, it's really distinct, it's really straightforward. Okay. Now, a lot of students come to me and say that they're really worried about doing live oral presentations. Public speaking is up there as one of the things that people fear the most, more than spiders. I believe more than heights as well, which is pretty insane because I feel like loads of people are scared of heights. But persuasive speaking and public speaking rather is something that can be grown and developed like any other skill. If you continue to practice and build on it, you will get better at it and the nerves will certainly ease as well. So this is a quick couple of pointers to help you on how to do well. If you have a good idea of the different techniques that you can be using, it allows you to feel a little bit more prepared and that can ease your nervousness as well. So when it comes to speaking, pause really is your best friend. Pausing for effect allows the reality of your point to sink in. It allows the audience to sit with it and really consider what it is that you are telling them. So putting emphasis on important points within your speech, important words that you feel like reflect your argument well, will also allow them to really clearly follow the line of argument throughout. Intonation is really important as well. There is nothing more boring than someone talking to you like this and saying, "Hello, my name is Maddie, and today I will be persuading you of this really important topic and point." I'm not really tempted to adhere to that particular point or that particular point of view. I'm not really interested in getting on board. So it's really important that you're changing your intonation, you're bringing your pitch up, you're bringing your volume up when it comes to important points, you're emphasizing things that matter. That will definitely help you create a more engaging speech. So give your hands something to do. It helps with the nerves as well. So when you are practicing for this speech, stand in front of a mirror and watch yourself as you present. So if you're doing signposting, if you're saying like, these are the different points that I'm talking about, you can count them off on your fingers. Firstly, I will be talking about this. Secondly, I will be talking about this. And finally, I will be talking about this. Giving words more weight by marking them with your hands. I'm sure you've seen me do this a couple of times in the presentation so far. If something has emphasis, I will emphasize it like this. If you can focus on what your hands are doing, on doing particular gestures, then you're less likely to pace or sway. And I see so many students stand up and they sort of do like that awkward side of the dance floor at a wedding sway where you don't have a partner to dance with, but you really like that song, so you're just standing there and swaying like this. Or they'll like pick at their uniform or like at their tie or something like that. Instead, we want to give your hands something to do. Now, I know that many of you will practice with palm cards and you'll have them like this, so you feel like a hand is missing. If you have to have palm cards, you can still emphasize with your hands with palm cards. But I encourage you, if you can, to use a full script and some sort of podium, even like a music stand instead that you can have your speech on, and typically put it to the side over here. So you can be referring to it and looking at it, but you have both of your hands free. You're not worried about dropping the palm cards and them going everywhere or losing, not having them in the right order or something like that. So definitely try and use a script if you can. Go ahead and test your audience. There is often quite a big difference between delivering a speech to yourself, just practicing to yourself in a mirror, and actually saying the speech to a live audience. So collect some friends and family members and practice speaking in front of them. Really making sure to test eye contact. This is something that teachers will really always look for, and you'll definitely be marked for maintaining eye contact as well. So be looking and having someone in the audience that you can look at and refer to. If you can, try and make eye contact with the teacher. That will definitely emphasize to them that you know what you're doing, that you're feeling cool, calm, and confident up there, even if you're not. And if it's a bit of a big step to go from just talking to yourself to talking to an audience, you can start off with pets. Let them know, they're not going to offer you any criticism or any feedback, so you can always start with them. The other thing with nerves is that sometimes you just got to fake it until you make it. Imagine you're in a different place or put on a bit of a character to get up there. A lot of my friends tell me that I have a very different public speaking voice to my normal conversational voice, and that's true because I am putting on almost a little bit of a character when I'm doing this part of my job. So if you use that technique, you can feel a little bit more confident speaking in front of people. And consider if you might have a similar technique to use. You're Obama, you're Oprah, you're someone who does this all the time. This is not concerning, this is not worrying. You've done it before. The other thing to remember is that everyone in the room with you is in the same boat. They all have to do persuasive speeches as well. They all have to stand up in front of you and do the exact same sort of task. So no one is particularly worrying about you. They're mostly worrying about themselves, I promise. And the teacher, they have also done this before. So there is no judgment there. Everyone is already in the exact same boat. Really important to remember. All right, we have blasted through the first sort of section of our session today. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10-minute break. I have been talking at you for quite a while. It's now the time to have a little bit of a rest, recoup, go and refill your water bottle, grab a snack, find a comfier spot to sit down in, all of those sorts of things. This is also a great time to be making use of the live Q&A chat below because you won't be trying to absorb new content at the same time. So go ahead, head down there, ask your questions and concerns, and we will get back into creative writing in 10 minutes time. Okay, let's get back into it. Give the last little stretch before we return. We've got about an hour to go. You're doing great. I'm excited that I'm here with you guys right now. Okay. So, one thing that I wanted to mention before we go any further is that these slides will be available for download below this video as in the little resource tab. So you can have them, you can refer to them, you can use them for your study and your review later on. I don't feel like you need to be taking loads and loads of notes, but of course, if that's how you prefer to learn, then definitely go ahead and do that as well. All right, we're going to get into creative writing. Now, I love creative writing. I think it's a lot of fun, but I know that plenty of students are a little bit nervous about it. It doesn't have the same sort of structure that many of the other English tasks have, which makes it a little bit more difficult to approach. But we're going to break it down, we're going to simplify it a little bit, and I'm going to give you quite a few little tips to ensure that you have a sort of a solid idea or a solid plan about how you might go approaching a task like this, because often getting started with creative is the hardest part. If you just continue looking at a blank page, you can sort of get caught in a bit of a loop, not able to get things going. But if you have a little bit of a more solid approach, then that part of the process is easier. So that's my hope for this section of our session today. All right. The traditional purpose of creative writing is to entertain. That's why people tell stories. But it is also used to communicate deeper messages to a much wider audience as well. So not everyone likes reading the news, not everyone likes reading analytical essays about Shakespeare, but plenty of people enjoy reading stories. They enjoy watching movies, they enjoy watching plays, they enjoy watching TikTok videos. All of these are telling stories of some kind or another. The key features of creative writing can take hundreds of forms. There is no single cookie cutter approach to writing creatively, but it usually hinges on the genre or the type of piece. So the Gothic genre, for instance, or poetry is like a particular style of writing. So typically creative writing comes as a response to a text. So you'll be given some other kind of text, a poem or a short story, a play, a novella, those kind of things, and then you have to write a creative piece in response to that text. So often it'll be done as in exam conditions, so you'll respond in your creative writing in exam conditions. So yes, that is that. All right, as I definitely alluded to right at the start of our session today, and a few more times throughout, planning is your friend. It is your friend for creative writing just as it is your friend for analytical as well. Just because you aren't writing an essay doesn't mean that you should lose all sense of logic and flow. In a creative piece, you have this natural build up of tension towards a climax where you're drawing audiences in closer, ready for a bit of a reveal. So your writing needs to be clear. It needs to have that clear sense of build up, that rise in emotion as well. So where are you going? Where is the story going? What do you want people to get out of your piece? What do you want audiences to understand by the time they're finished reading? When you begin your plan, start with key characters, plot points, setting, etc. Whatever you have predetermined in your mind that you want to write about, use that as a starting point. As I said earlier, this idea of blank page syndrome can really paralyze students. It prevents them from getting started. So whatever you have in your mind, whatever idea you have, no matter how far-fetched it might seem, get it down on the piece of paper and use it to start forming a broader idea. You can build the story around any tiny little detail that you'd like. It's really important to remember that your first draft is just a skeleton. It's just a foundation. It's not what you're going to be handing in at the end. It's pretty much impossible to get a product that you're really, really proud of the first try. So don't be afraid to go back to your draft and add in aesthetic features, build on it, refine it, add dialogue or improve description. Like a cake, you can really build a creative a layer at a time. And often, despite popular belief, creatives often aren't even written in chronological order either. You might like write your conclusion because you have a really solid idea of what that's going to look like, and then you go back, excuse me, and write a section from the middle and do the same again. So depth, intricacy, complexity, all of that comes with time. So as I mentioned earlier as well, you want to give yourself as much time as possible to create a story that you're really proud of. And often the final story that you hand in as your final piece will look very, very different to perhaps the one that you initially planned. That's just the nature of creative writing. It's really important to make it your own in the same way that you're far more engaged in watching a movie that you picked, that you actually enjoy. The same thing goes for writing creatively as well. So I encourage you to tackle with and play around with concepts, characters, ideas, and themes that you're passionate about, that you find interesting, that you would want to read about or watch about or hear about. So write characters that excite you, set the story in places that you love, deal with problems that you feel like you want to find a solution to yourself. That will make the writing process far easier because you're emotionally invested in what you're writing rather than something that feels very far away and distant. Alright, so it's most likely that your creative piece is going to be in response to a separate text. So you'll be given an initial text and you have to sort of create an adaptation of that story or play with the key themes or ideas or take a key character and reshape them in some sort of way. So a few pieces of advice based on this part of the process, because this can be a little bit tricky as well. Give yourself time to read the stimulus, that base text as it might be called, in its entirety and as thoroughly as possible. So you want to get a really good grip about the author's message, their key intention in writing the text, a really good understanding of the characters and the key themes, even the writing style as well, because all of that can be used as inspiration for your own story. It's likely that your teacher will give you something specific that you have to bring into your own piece. But if you get to choose for yourself, I would encourage you to pick something like a key theme because it's really broad and it allows you a lot of freedom within that to write about what you actually want to write about rather than, taking a key character or a key event that you have to reshape. That can be a little bit trickier. So have a go at not just looking at one element, but even some subtler elements or smaller elements in the base text that you can incorporate into your own writing as well, even just referencing them. So it could be the main character in the base text has a nickname that is used a lot. And in your writing, perhaps the house that your main character lives in, has that same nickname. Maybe there's a little Easter egg in terms of costuming, which you include in yours as well. Or a key aesthetic feature like a symbol or a motif that is used a lot in the original that you incorporate in your own piece of writing, but in a new way. So think about how you can draw little parallels and have little Easter eggs in your own writing. Teachers will be able to recognize them because they're English teachers, and they'll love it. They will eat it up and you will definitely be rewarded for it. So have a little bit of fun about how you might take smaller, subtler elements from the original and incorporate them into your own writing as well. It's going to demonstrate that you have carefully read and understood the base text, but also incorporating the same aesthetic features in conjunction with your own. So you're not just taking the original and sort of tweaking it a little bit and hope that no one can tell the difference. You want to create something that is wholly new. You want to have a new author's message that is entirely yours. You're just getting inspiration from the original text a little bit. All right. The most important element of a piece of creative writing is good characters. I've said it once, I've said it a million times, it is absolutely true. Good characters, they are the vessel of the story. If an audience can't connect or relate to a main character, then they're not actually going to be interested with the deeper message that you're trying to tell. I'm sure you've all read or watched or heard some sort of media in the past where it looked really interesting on paper. Maybe like the little Netflix description looked so interesting and you're like, this is totally up my street. I am so interested in watching this. And then the main character is just so annoying or so shallow or has terrible relationships or something like that, and you just can't watch it no matter how interesting the concept is. We want to avoid this problem with your own writing as well, and that goes back to writing really good characters. So the best characters are very simply believable. Human beings aren't just one thing. They exist on a whole spectrum of human emotion with thousands of different emotions within it. So they have complicated pasts, everyone has different backstories, they're unique, they grow, they change, they develop. So this means that they often might appear simple right at the beginning of your story because you're only writing short stories. You don't have time for long, lots of exposition. But as they go through, they'll gain complexity and depth, and the audience will understand more about them as they go. Their character, their personality will come through in the way that they act and the way that they speak. So actions and words are sort of working together to create this image, this personality in the mind of readers. And they aren't bogged down by physical description. As I said before, this is a short story. You really don't have the word count to be doing like a whole paragraph on the particular shade of blue that their eyes are. It's just not entirely relevant. Audiences kind of like to come up with their own picture of the character in their mind anyway. So unless the physical description is important to the story or important to a particular theme or relationship, then you don't even really have to mention it. It's more about what they're like, what they say, how they act. That is what is going to engage audiences more. That's what's going to make them more interesting. So how do you write good characters? Really what you want to do is answer these 3 questions for each of your characters. Now, you probably don't have time to have a cast of, 12 or 13 people. Generally, it's 1, 2, or 3 characters. So for each of the characters that you're including in your short story, you want to answer these 3 questions for them in order to shape a personality for each that is really believable. The first is, what do you want? What do you want most in the world? Humans are generally pretty ambitious creatures. Everyone kind of wants something. Everyone's working towards something. And you can tell a lot about a person based on what it is that they want. World peace, world destruction, a good sandwich from the shop down the road. So first you need to look at what the character's goal is and see where their priorities lie. Next is, why do you want it? So the reasoning behind a character's desires could be their personality, their background, or even the situation they find themselves in the text in. So why is it that they want world peace? Why is it that they want a sandwich from the shop down the road? And then how do you plan on getting it? More than anything, the means and lengths to which a character will go to get what they want is important. Maybe a character wants a sandwich, but they'll kill someone to get it. The stakes are immediately raised there. It's not just as simple as like, oh, I'm a little bit hungry and like Vegemite's the only thing we have in the fridge and like, I know there's a little bit of bread in the freezer, so I'll just, make a Vegemite sandwich. It's like, no. Vegemite, there's only one Vegemite sandwich left on earth, and I have to be the last one that eats the Vegemite sandwich because the last one that eats the Vegemite sandwich will get the blessing of eternal life. And so I have to be the one that has the last Vegemite sandwich. And so I am willing to do whatever it takes to get that sandwich. I will kill someone to get that sandwich. And immediately the stakes are raised and we have a story, we have something interesting, we have something engaging, we have a character that we want to explore more, that we are interested to follow and hear more about. All right, so a little bit of an example. We have a classic character that I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, at least to some extent, and some of you will be even more familiar with by the end of the year, and that is Hamlet of Denmark from the Shakespearean play Hamlet. Now, what type of character is he? Now, there's a little bit of contention about what type of character is he. Some people believe he's a hero, some people believe he's an anti-hero. That's kind of up for debate. So what is his desire? What does he want more than anything in the world? Well, he wants revenge for his father and to bring order back to Denmark. So his father has been murdered. Spoiler, Hamlet spoiler. His father has been murdered. He wants revenge for his father's murder. And because he is the Prince of Denmark, he wants to bring order back to his kingdom. Why does he want it? What are the lengths and means? Hamlet is willing to kill people and himself, Hamlet spoiler, to ensure order is restored to the kingdom. He schemes and he tricks and he sacrifices in the name of justice. But his plans really reveal the truth of him. His character is revealed in the way that Hamlet goes about this plan. due to his personality, he never gets around to doing it as he should. He is the #1 literary procrastinator. He just goes, oh, not yet. Not yet. Should I do that? Should I not do that? Should I do that? And then he doesn't really do anything in time, and he's punished for it by the end of the play. Hamlet spoiler. It is really important to remember you need to consider the key message of the text. So like, what point are you trying to make? What do you want audiences to know or understand by the end of the text? And how might that character link to that understanding as well? Really, really important. All right. Other little things about characters, you can make a little bit more of a refined, robust profile for your characters, particularly if you only have one or two, to really allow you to get in their shoes. And as you write, they will feel really believable, as if they're real people. So maybe where are they from? Their physical and cultural background can define what a person is like. It can define who they've become and what they've gone through to be the person that they are today. What do they like and dislike? This indicates what they crave and what they value, what repulses them, and what might set them on the path to justice. Physical traits. Now, I know I said that physical traits aren't that important, but for you as the author, if you want to be able to picture them in your own mind, then you might consider what they physically look like. It's also possible that the story, their physical traits are important to the story. So perhaps the person that will be, cursed will be the first person born with brown eyes in 1,000 years, something like that. So something physical is actually important to the story. And then also their situation. So what unique or different circumstances does your story present? How is this story, this situation different to their regular life? How does it spur them into action? Why is this the moment where they decide that they're going to go after what it is they really want? And how does your character respond to the situation? Are they really excited? Are they engaged? Are they ready to get started? Or are they a little bit more apprehensive and like, oh, I don't know, a bit of a reluctant hero? So it's important to get into their brains and to get into their shoes to help. All right. We're going to take another little moment for a little bit of an activity now. We're going to take 5 minutes, and I want you to pick a character from your favorite movie or TV show or book, and I want you to come up with a little bit of a profile for them like this one for Hamlet. So what type of character are they? Are they the hero? Are they the antagonist? Are they a sidekick character? Are they a love interest? What kind of character are they? And then you can answer these 3 questions. What is it that they want more than anything in the world? Why do they want it? And how do they plan on getting it? And then if you have time, you can write a little sentence or 2 sentences about what this means for their characterization. What kind of character does this make them? So have a go, have a write, play around with it. Think about how this creates good characters. Maybe that's the other question as well. Once you filled out that little profile, consider, why do you like this character so much? Why are they engaging? Why do you love them? And that can be really helpful when you're forming your own characters for your writing as well. All right, we've gotten started. Have a go. And then we'll get into a little bit more creative writing, and then we'll get into our analytical. Doing great. All right. Do you like how I just keep appearing out of nowhere? Okay, yes, excellent. Well done. So I hope that that was an interesting conversation, an interesting activity to explore the importance of characters. I think that when it comes to writing short stories, people really focus on the shape of the plot or the themes, and they forget that characters play such an important role in creative writing. And I think a lot of people don't realize the effect that good characterization has on a story, on tension, on emotion, on build-up, on all of these things. So I encourage you to continue thinking about characters even when you're not doing work in English, even when you're just playing around or reading or writing or watching movies for fun, to be considering those characters and considering the impact that they have. Okay, so remember, your character, they are the vessel for your message. Consider the motive. What do they want? Give them something to chase and make them want to chase it badly. This leads to the build-up in tension and emotion. What are the lengths? What are they willing to do? How far are they willing to go? Put them in a situation in your story where they have to grow and struggle and fight to achieve what it is that they want. And then what do they want to do? How do they plan on achieving the thing? Be creative. Don't just hand it to them. Make them work for it. And you want the journey to be as interesting as possible. All right. So you're going to have to be writing in short story form. So there are a couple of key tips that I wanted to share with you guys, because I know that writing in a shorter format can be tricky. You're trying to get this really sort of verbose and complicated and intricate author's message across, but you don't have a lot of words to do that in. So I just wanted to give you a few tips about how to write short. So you don't have a lot of room for characterization, so your character's voice needs to be really distinct from the very first moment that audiences meet them. You want their characterization to be evident in their actions and their speech rather than any detailed descriptions of them. So don't write, Sophie knew that Luke loved Vegemite all his life because he was such a messy eater and he always had a little bit in the corner of his mouth. She noticed this because she had known him all this time. Instead, you can have the very same information, because there's lots of information in that left column. You can have the same amount of information in a much shorter stance like this. Sophie looked up to see the familiar smudge of Vegemite in the corner of Luke's mouth. At least some things don't change. Alright, your cast should be little, so you don't want to have loads of characters. Too many names, too many personalities, too many stories. It just gets confusing. Remember, clarity over complexity. It also eats up your word count. You just don't have the time for it. So keep the cast of characters nice and short. In a similar way, adding subplots, so like lots of stories within the story, it'll add unnecessary length, and it doesn't ultimately contribute to the key message that you're trying to deliver to audiences. So keep it nice and simple so your message shines clearly throughout. If you want to add extra stakes, if you want to add extra tension, all of that needs to be included right at the beginning of the story so that there's tension build up right from the beginning. Exposition in short stories is boring. You don't have time for it. You need to start with a bang. So start right in the middle of action. Something shocking, something sort of jaw-dropping has happened right at the beginning. It's the same sort of activity you want to do as with your hook in a persuasive speech. You want to grab people's attention right from the get-go. So go ahead and start with that bang to get people interested in reading your story. All right, so you want your story to be memorable. So it's really important that you do so in order to leave an impact by the end of the story. So your stakes need to be high for your lead character. It's not sort of just, they're in bed and they hope they could stay in bed. You want to use emotion, really deep emotion, to connect your audience to the story, and be ruthless in your editing. If a word, a sentence, a phrase doesn't add to the overall message you're trying to share, cut it out. Get rid of it. If you are feeling particularly attached to something but it doesn't feel like it fits in the story, you can cut it from a document and save it in a different document for later. All right, try to avoid cliches. It was all a dream and then it all went black. Those sorts of things. It won't take long for you to think of something more clever than that. Those cliches have been overdone, they're overused, they don't have the same impact that maybe they did when they first were invented. So be creative, think outside the box, and pick something different. All right, so to keep things nice and tight, the problem needs to be introduced right at the beginning of the story. Really important. Characterization is built through the character's response to the problem. The problem cannot be fixed initially. That is what brings distress and tension to the story. And the problem needs to be resolved by the end. So we don't want to have cliffhangers, again, overdone. So instead there needs to be some sort of resolution. That doesn't mean that it needs to be a Disney happily ever after at the end, but we need to feel as if things have sort of come to some kind of conclusion. Also, if you're writing in a Word or a Google document, you can double space your lines. It sometimes just tricks your brain to think that there are more words on the page than there actually are, and that'll help you to keep things nice and tight and not add too many extra words. Because if you start filling up loads of pages, you'll be like, whoa, too much, and sort of have to rein it back. So that's like a little trick that you can do to keep things going. All right. I'm mindful of timing, so if we have time at the end, we'll go back and do that activity at the end because that's a really fun one. But let's get into analytical writing, because I know that this is something that you guys are definitely anticipating if you're in year 12, because of course the analytical task is the external exam at the end of the year. So analytical writing is all about using evidence to derive meaning from a text. You're taking quotes, examples from the text, and analyzing them to find out how audiences are positioned to think, feel, and react. So analytical writing, thankfully, if you're not a huge fan of creative, analytical is a bit like coming home. It has a pretty rigid structure. So intro, body, and conclusion, and then there's structures within those different sections of the essay as well. We're using formal language, tone, and style, definitely more of an academic piece. And you will be writing analysis to prove an argument. So you're coming up with a thesis that you are arguing throughout your whole essay. So it will come in a standard essay form. Generally, it's in exam conditions, and that's certainly the case for units 3 and 4. All right, so a rut that students often fall into is having really amazing analysis, really strong ideas, really good analysis and evidence, rather, that's what I'm trying to say, but no clear links between their points. So this results in sort of a janky, all over the place, inarticulate, often unnecessarily wordy essay. So to combat this, we like to talk about these diagrams called logic flows, which help you build a really strong essay with a clear thread woven throughout. And that clear thread is your thesis, woven throughout the whole piece. So a logic flow works in 2 ways. A microflow is within one point, and it helps you step through your analysis in a really clear way. And a macro flow is a basic skeleton for an entire essay. It's basically a very detailed plan for an essay, and it's the wide lens that we'll be looking at in this particular section. All right, so the things that you need to build your very own macro logic flow. You need a thesis. Your thesis is the skull and spine of your essay. It is the most important part of the body. There are clear links to this throughout your entire piece. So everything in the body connects back to the skull and the spine. Without it, the essay is paralyzed. Nothing moves, nothing works well if you don't have your spine and skull intact, basically. So your thesis is your argument. So some of you guys might know it as a contention, but it's basically just the argument that you're proving throughout the piece. The opinion and perspective that you need to support, build upon, and return to throughout your entire essay. You also need to include your basic points. So these are kind of the topic sentences for each of your body paragraphs, and they act as joints, if we're using the body analogy, which we are, to connect all of your evidence together and allow your evidence to move towards your thesis. So they come in the form of topic sentences, and they will show your reader exactly where you are in your argument and what you're going to be talking about in your paragraph. So again, clarity over complexity, remember our golden rule. This is so true in your thesis and so true in your topic sentences. These need to be abundantly clear. These need to be the clearest part of your essay, because otherwise whoever is marking or reading your work won't know where you're up to, won't know what you're talking about, and things will get muddled and confused. So definitely make sure you are having real clarity in those parts of the essay. Then you need to have your evidence. So your evidence includes, your evidence works as sort of the limbs of your essay. It's the arms and the legs. So without it, your essay can't go anywhere. They can't move anywhere. They can't pick anything up. This will come in the form of key quotes, typically within analytical, but it also can come in the form of structural devices as well. So stage directions in play, broad characterization, growth of tension, all of those sorts of things can also be used as evidence in an analytical essay. It could be dialogue, description, characterization, narration. Anything can be used, but it must work to prove your particular argument. So you're not just picking key quotes that are famous or key quotes that you talked about in class or anything like that. You need to be picking the best evidence that reflects and proves your argument. That's super important. And your macro flow also needs to include some basic analysis and audience positioning. So to give your essay some stylistic integrity and basic shape, these are the ligaments that hold all the basic building blocks in place. So analysis is peeling back the layers to examine what the author really meant when they said X, Y, and Z. What does this metaphor mean? What do they want the audience to feel or think, or how do they want the audience to react to this particular part of the text? All of those sorts of things come into your analysis and audience positioning. And then you need to have some sort of closing statement, a little sentence or two that you might include in your conclusion. So the feet, the final part of our body analogy, without them the essay is not complete. So logic has the most strength when it is continued right through to the end. Your thesis needs to be argued until your last breath at the end of this essay. So it should be really obvious in your conclusion what your thesis is and that you've argued it successfully, basically throughout. So you can wrap up your piece by rewording your thesis to basically say, yes, I have proven this to be correct. And you need to ask yourself the question, basically, if this was a debate, if I was doing a sort of persuasive speech, would the audience be satisfied with my conclusion? Would they feel as if I had argued this successfully? All right. So this is what a macro flow looks like. It's a little bit messy on a PowerPoint slide, but hopefully with the help of my cursor, I'll be able to show you the different parts. So the best way to do a flow is to draw it physically, and this is certainly going to be the case in your analytical exam. In your planning time, about 15 minutes at the start of the exam, this is when you'd be creating this. And the key thing that you need to be doing in the lead up to this exam is practicing doing this in a short amount of time. So the more often you practice doing a plan in exam conditions, the far more prepared you'll be to actually writing the exam. Because honestly, this is going to be the hardest part of the exam, is getting all of your ideas down on the page, getting things connected and flowing nicely together. All right, so lots of connecting branches, lots of arrows. So you begin with your thesis at the top of the page, and you should highlight the most important words within your thesis. Those important words can be repeated throughout the essay, and it indicates to the marker that you're building on your thesis, you're linking back to your thesis, everything connects to your thesis. Below your thesis, you draw an arrow to your first point, and this is actually this arrow here. So next to the arrow, write a rough topic sentence for your body paragraph number 1. How does this point connect to your argument, and how will your evidence play into it? That is the key question you need to be asking yourself. And then below that topic sentence, this way over here, add your evidence. There should be only 2 or 3 pieces of evidence in your paragraph if you are using the appropriate amount of detail, which is lots. There needs to be lots of detail in all of your paragraphs. And then from there, from your evidence, you begin to dot point little bits of analysis, audience positioning, and critic's perspective if that's applicable for the task that you're doing. Everything you write needs to link back to your thesis. So important. And you're adding the layers of your argument one at a time. Now, I know that in the context of a exam conditions, only 15 minutes of planning time, you won't have time to be writing out all of your analysis and audience positioning in sentence form. There's just not the time for that. But just dot pointing them out can be a really good way, and it helps so much with writer's block because you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to write for my analysis. Right. And then your paragraphs must link. So your essay needs to work as a whole body made up of different parts. So in between when you've completed all your body paragraph 1 and you're linking to your next paragraph, make sure you have a little cohesive device. This is further explored. Therefore, as a result, however, using those little cohesive words to ensure that everything links together. Nice. All right. Once you're done, this is something that you might be doing if you are practicing outside of exam conditions. I know that you might not entirely have the time to be doing this within the exam room, but highlight throughout the plan how many times you've mentioned your thesis, either explicitly or implicitly. You need to have plenty of color on the page. If you don't, that's a pretty good indication that you need to be linking back to your thesis more. And when we talk about microflows in a moment, you'll see what I mean when I say linking back to your thesis. Now, it's really important to remember that you are considered the smartest person in the room. You know more than than the reader of your work, and you need to do the job of stepping them through your logic and your argument. You can't just assume that they have made the same logic jumps as you have, that they've made the same connections that you have. It's up to you to help them do that. And there you go. That's 80% of an essay completed. That's all of the hard work. It's just up to you to take that and put that in sentence form. If you continue to practice making these flows for lots of different essay options or topics, then the process of linking and sequencing your logic together comes a million times easier. And you've established another skill that will help you write quickly and effectively in your exams. All right, so the basic ingredients for analytical pieces, as we mentioned before, your thesis, it's the answer to the given question or task, your evidence, your analysis, and your audience positioning. And all of this can be plugged down into this below, which is called a microflow. So your microflow is used multiple times within a body paragraph every time you introduce a new piece of evidence. So it starts off with what? What? That's your evidence. So what? What does this evidence mean? That's your analysis. So how? How does this analysis position readers to think, feel, and react? So now, how does this link back to my thesis? And you repeat that for every new piece of evidence that you have. All right, so refer back to your thesis constantly. Use the same words or synonyms of the words in your thesis to indicate really clearly to the marker that that's what you're doing. Link your paragraphs via your topic sentences, and your topic sentences need to be really clear indicators of what the paragraph is about and how your argument is being built into that paragraph. Check that your ideas make sense in the order that they are in. Your first paragraph should be your strongest point, and then you continue to build on that using other evidence in your other paragraphs. Other tips outside of the actual exam room as you're writing: annotate your text really well, highlight important quotes, mark up characterization and change and development in characters and change and development in relationships as well, mark themes, and you can even do a little basic analysis in the margins of your texts as well. It just means when you're getting close to crunch time, close to the exam, you have so much information in your text that you don't have to go like flailing through the text to actually find things that are relevant to your argument, but rather things are marked really clearly. Using the little like sticky tabs that stick out the side of a book are so useful for that as well. So you can give each key theme or each key character a different color sticky tab and then mark that along, and it just makes finding important information really easily again. Practice analyzing key quotes in depth. That should be an absolute knee-jerk skill that you have by the time you do this exam, and definitely plan your essay before you write it. You can also practice doing those macro flows, those big plans, because if you can do a whole one in 15 minutes or even 20 minutes using a little bit of your writing time, then your life will just be 3 million times easier. So good. All right, let's take All right, let's get a little activity to wrap up. We're almost done with our session today. Take 3 minutes to go through and see if you can identify elements of the microflow in the practice paragraph here. And we're doing Hamlet again. Some key things to know about this is that Claudius is Hamlet's uncle, and Claudius killed Hamlet's father. So that's a little bit of important context. But see if you can identify elements of that microflow in that paragraph. Then it will almost be time to wrap up for today. It might actually take 5 minutes to do that. Have a go at pulling that apart. How can you see how that formula works? And also consider, do you feel like that formula is effective? Do you feel like the analysis has been done strongly? All right. Let's have a little think here. So, what is the evidence? Claudius's treachery is laid bare, and by allowing it to continue, Hamlet reveals his own lack of morality. So, really clear, really succinct, really to the point topic sentence, which is very important, remember. When confronted with the vulnerable Claudius in prayer, Hamlet evades the deed of killing him. So, not only is the evidence inserted there, but it's also contextualized. It's not just like an act number or a scene number placed after it, but it's contextualized in the context of where it is in the plot, and that just makes whoever is reading the work kind of understand a little bit better, okay, where are we in the plot, what's happening, and that allows with clarity as well. So, Hamlet evades the deed of killing him. Up sword, and know thou a more horrid hent, in the incestuous pleasure of his bed. Incestuous mirrors the sordid diction of Claudius's own confession and communicates to audiences that Hamlet is aware of the corruption, the evil behavior the prince has the power and opportunity to stop, but would rather sheath his sword and allow horrid deeds to continue to satisfy his own parameters for revenge. This moral weakness upsets the balance of the tumultuous court further. Thus, the audience is positioned to see his actions as the catalysts of his destruction in the closing scene of the play. Ultimately, it is this lack of moral strength that is the nail Shakespeare drives into audiences, positioning them to condemn Hamlet's actions and to view him as weak. So, evidence. Contextualized, here it is, nice and neat in its quotation marks with the ellipses to indicate that sections of the quote have been taken out. That allows you to include all of the elements you want to include without having to, take up 6 lines where you're writing out the whole thing and only talking about 2 sections. And then you have your analysis, so pulling out specific elements from the text. You can see that incestuous is explored, as well as horrid is explored as well. This idea of using particular aesthetic features, this idea of sordid diction. So diction is the aesthetic feature that's explored there. So how does it position audiences? And we see really clearly in the language that the author of this has used, the audience is positioned. So really clear, explicit language to indicate that that position is being shown. And then link back to thesis here in the final 2 sentences. You can see this idea that Hamlet has a distinct lack of morality as explored and indicated up here, down in this final sentence here, positioning them to condemn Hamlet's actions and view him as weak. Lack of morality viewed as weak. Really, really interesting. Okay. We are coming to the end of our session today. We have talked about a whole range of things. So I wanted to go through and just indicate again a few things that I think are really important. So in terms of tips and advice, if you want to get better at English, if you want to build and strengthen your skills, it is really important to be doing English-based structures outside of English class, outside of English study and homework. So be reading, read 15 minutes a day. Remember those books that I recommended at the start. Continue to drop your book recommendations in the live Q&A chat below. And also be writing if you can. There are thousands of creative writing prompts online that are so easy to find. Toss a few of them into a random number generator and give yourself 10 or 15 minutes to just write a creative prompt. There was one earlier that we didn't get time to do, but is so fun. It's to try and write a short story without using a certain letter. So one of the hardest ones is E, trying to write a story without using the letter E. You will be shocked at how often that letter appears in everything. And there's a little example down here. This activity is a bit difficult. I don't think I'm going to go particularly far with this story, but I'm going to put my all ... So have a play around with creative writing prompts. You will find that just after a few days, a few weeks of doing this regularly, that your writing will improve so quickly and with a kind of severity that you might not expect. And also it will help with your creativity as well. So definitely have a go at doing that. In your persuasive writing, make sure that you're engaging your audiences right from the get-go. So think very explicitly about how you're going to hook audiences in. So important. and make sure that you are engaging them with different strategies in terms of persuasion. So try pathos, try ethos, try logos, and don't forget to have a call to action at the end to indicate to audiences that there is something that can be done about this problem, there's something that we can fix. When it comes to creative writing, the golden rule is all about developing your characters. So make sure you're thinking about what it is that the characters want, why do they want it, and how do they plan on getting it? And use the answers to those questions to create really round, full, believable characters. You'll be surprised at how easily it becomes to do that in just a short period of time. So consider those characters deeply, play around with them, have a little bit of fun, think outside the box, write stories that you would want to read. And when it comes to your analytical writing, you have the gloriousness of a good structure. Don't forget that planning is so important. And remember that cohesion and synthesis is really the name of the game in terms of marking and in the minds of teachers. So practice those macro flows, practice writing plans. If you are doing an unseen question in exam conditions, which you all will be, then find for yourself a nice long list of practice questions. It's quite likely that your school or teacher will provide some for you, but for many of the tasks and texts rather that you will be reading for this task, they have been studied 1,000,000 times and been written about 1,000,000 times. So there will be example questions for essays online. Find a few, pop them into a random number generator, and practice answering a question, an unseen question in exam conditions by doing those practice macro flows. And doing them just a few times will allow you to really streamline that process. It will test your understanding of the novel or the text or the play, and it will test your memorization of your evidence as well, because I know for many of you, you won't be able to bring evidence into the room with you. So practice and test that memorization as well. That's kind of the best and easiest way to do it. All right. The final thing to say, let me head down here, is to just say thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a big, long session. There's so much information there, but I'm so pleased and grateful that you could be here with us. The Q&A chat will be open for a few minutes more, so make sure you continue to ask your questions down there. Make sure you just ask whatever it is you'd like to hear about, and there will be someone there to chat through that and answer those questions for you. I wanted to thank you on behalf of ATAR Notes for joining us here today. Remember that if you're interested in making study the easiest it has ever been for you, to check out atarnotes.com for the huge range of high quality resources we have on offer for students. There is so much there to explore and so much to enjoy. So definitely get over to the website to check it out. You can also go ahead and follow us on Instagram at atarnotesAUS. That's ATAR Notes AUS for study resources and tips and tricks all throughout the week as well. We would love to see you there as well. Thank you again so much for this incredible opportunity. It has been really fun to share all of this advice with you guys. I wanted also to just wish you all the very best of luck with your studies, particularly those of you who are in year 12. You've got this. Take every opportunity that comes to you. Have fun. Don't take it too seriously, and you're going to have a great time. If I don't see you soon over at ATAR Notes or at TuteSmart, thank you again. I wish you all the very